Hi there, it's Olga. Hope you are doing great. Today I'm going to repurpose some dies to create a card that is shaped like an old romantic Swedish style house. I don't have any really large house-shaped dies, but I do have the clock die set, which I think is going to work just fine. I'll be using the largest die from Time on Your Hands die set, and this one is clock-shaped. It measures about 6 by 10 inches, so it will fit into the regular die cutting machine if you wanted to. For the card base, I'm also going to use a light gray cardstock that is Stone by Creative Expressions. I am going to do a partial die cutting technique, so I'm placing the die onto my sheet of cardstock and taping it down to prevent it from shifting. Then I'm going to back up this piece of cardstock with another sheet because I'm going to die cut through 2 layers at one go. Then I'm placing the 2 sheets onto the cutting plate and I'm covering up the die with another cutting plate so that only the top part is going to be die cut. So this is the result that we should get. The top portion is now die cut, but not the rest of the clock. By the way, I have some good news for those who asked me about this die and stamp set. It is now back in stock at Craft Stash. Please check out the links down below in the description where I have all the products linked up. To complete the house shape, I'm going to use a craft knife and a cutting mat, which are one of my very favorite tools ever. I'm placing the ruler at the point where the die cutting ends, and I'm just cutting a straight line down, and I'm making sure that the ruler is parallel to the edge of the cardstock. Then I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. I have repeated this process for another house shape, and now these 2 pieces are going to be the front and back of my card base. I'm going to trim off that loop at the top that makes them look more like a clock rather than a house. To make the card look completely like a house, we have to add some windows or doors or both. We could totally use a small window dies here and just add a few rows of windows, but this time I think I'm just going to add one really large window. All the dies that I'm using today are by Paper Discovery. I have sent this die through the die cutting machine, and now I have the window die cut into the panel of the card. Since I have used just a plain cardstock, I need to add some texture to it. So first of all, I'm going all around the edges with the gray distress ink. It's Hickory Smoke, I believe. Then I'm also going to use a texture stamp. This one is by Holtz. I'm going to stamp it repeatedly around the edges, and this time I'm using the gray Archival ink. It's a really old stamp set, and if it is still available, I will also link it up down below in the description. There is a pretty embossed pattern at the top of the house that I would really like to stand out more, so I'm just going to use the die as a stencil, and I'm also using a white gel pen to simply fill in the open shapes there. So I'm gonna take my time and color in all those shapes. I'm moving slowly to make sure I get an even ink coverage. And this is what the pattern looks like after coloring. At this point, I think I want even more color variations and more texture, so I'm going to use the white pigment ink and I'm applying it with a sponge dauber only at the top portion of the house, right above the pattern that I have colored in with the ink. Well, there is a tag die set at Paper Discoveries that works perfectly with that window, so I've die cut the open frame using the two largest dies. Then I'm going to use a matching embossing folder to add some stone texture to that frame. This is what the die cut and embossed shape looks like. I believe the embossing folder can add much more texture than embossing with the die. I have applied some double-sided foam tape at the wrong side, and now I'm sticking down the frame right onto the card front around the window. To back up the window, I've die cut the tag shape out of light pink cardstock, and then I'm also going to add the curtain. Paper doilies make absolutely the best crochet curtains for cards. I'm always using them for this purpose, and now I'm gonna do it again. Now I am applying some liquid glue just around the outline of that tag shape, and I'm going to place the card front on top of it, and this way I'm backing up the window. This window can be done in a lot of different ways. For instance, you can add acetate to look like glass, you can keep it completely open, or you can turn it into the shaker window, just whatever you can think of. There is a small circle at the top of the house that looks a little bit plain to me, so I have decided to add a bread to decorate it. I wouldn't like to pierce through the cardstock this time, so I'm using the wire cutters for jewelry making to trim off the legs from the bread, and then I'm going to stick it down with the hot glue. Now it's time to add some smaller details to the window, and I'll be using some dies from different sets by Paper Discovery. So I have chosen this glass vase with flowers, and I will also be using a sleeping cat. I'm sticking down all the elements onto the card with the liquid adhesive. By the way, that glue I'm using is Ranger Multimedia Matte in a needle applicator bottle. And to add even more texture to the card and a splash of color, I'm going to use the tiny paper roses, and I'm sticking them down onto the die-cut flowers on my card. I think that hot glue gun is the best for sticking down dimensional elements like these, but liquid glue will also work fine. And finally, I'm also going to add a stamped sentiment. The stamp I'm going to use is also by Paper Discovery, and as you can see, there are some straight ones as well as curved one. So I'm choosing the curved Happy Birthday to go above the window. I used a full A4 sheet of cardstock to create the card front, and at this point I think that the card turned out to be a bit too long, so I'm just going to use a paper trimmer and trim it down a little bit from the bottom. To finish off the card base, I'm going to take the plain house shape, which is the back of the card. I'm placing it into the scoring board, and I'm scoring it just below the shaped top part like this. Then I'm applying some liquid glue onto the tab, making sure I cover up all the intricate areas, and then I'm sticking down the card front on top. This way you can open up and close the card, and it can also stand on its own on a horizontal surface. So this is what the finished project looks like. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you found some ideas interesting and you are going to give them a try. And by the way, this clock die set can be used to make cards of different shapes and colors, and you can also create 3D projects. If you're wondering how to make the clock tower paper lantern as well as the pocket watch mini card, I do have a tutorial on my channel, and I'll put the link in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!